Have you ever had a chance to sit down with family or friends and talk about an event that happened a long time ago? I promise you that if you have a conversation with your siblings or friends about a long ago Christmas or a vacation, and you start comparing notes about the same event that you were all there for, and you start recalling it, you're going to find out that everybody has a lot different memory of the events and things that happened long ago. Well, about 35 years ago, when I was starting to look at the effects of memory on the things that we recall and how we recall them, what we believed about 30 years ago was the fact that we recorded memory almost what we would call digitally, that it was inscribed into our brain in a very detailed fashion, and with hypnosis or something, you could go back and recover an exact duplicate of what it is that you think you remembered. We now understand, after all these decades of research, that memory is very much not like that. That in fact, memory is recorded in what I call Lego style, or Lego memory, and that is that it is each time that you remember something, it's retrieved from a different part of your brain and reconstructed Lego-like into what it is that what happened, or what you think might have happened. And in fact, now we know that when you start remembering things from long ago, that memory will be tainted or contaminated, if you will, by things like the length of time that you're trying to remember something, how old you were when the event occurred, similar events that happened at other times that might mix with that particular memory. Even your audience and who you're telling it to in the present will be affected by time and all of those elements. So in essence, you learn to kind of recognize that memory is reconstructed each time we tell it, and we need to be careful that we don't place too much emphasis on a lot of particular details, because it may turn out that those memories might not be as accurate as we think they are. Interesting that when we talk about the prophet Joseph Smith, who had a traumatic theophany in the Grove in 1820, as he began to tell that story 12 years later, what for him was a private experience, that then as he started to share it, other members of the church were very interested, and he started to record it and started to tell it. We have about 4 major instances of him retelling that we recorded, and then about 9 others where it's referred to. Critics of the church have looked at this and said the details of each one of those retellings are off, and one detail is here and it's not there, and he tells it a little bit differently in each place. And because of that, that's proof that somehow Joseph was fraudulent, or that he was making this up. In fact, Joseph's retelling of a traumatic emotional event for a young boy, he responded to it in later life exactly the way that I would have expected that somebody would have been trying to reach back into his memory and recall an amazing event. And it would have also been directed by who he was telling, versus was he writing it for a history, versus was he telling it at the moment he's sitting in his comfort in Kirtland, versus after he's been in the Liberty jail, that each one of the aspects of that memory would be a little bit more vivid to him. Stephen Harper has written a beautiful book on taking this concept at large. But I think the message for today is that we need to take a look at those different first vision versions, if you will, and say that the process of memory and retaining an understanding of what happened in our past is exactly what Joseph Smith did as he was trying to retell and recall what happened in the Grove. Certainly to that we could have added any kind of editing that he chose to do given the audience. But that said, he is doing exactly what I would expect him to do given the properties of memory, and change some of the details depending on his audience. So I think it's one of those areas that we don't need to be too concerned about. Had he said, had he told the story exactly the same 12 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, that's when I think we needed to have been concerned, because then it was going to be more of a canned response and not reliant on the memory of an actual event. Thanks.